Recently, I did a video on 6 self-abandonments that are keeping you anxious and resentful. And I got a comment from @cupofnoodlesoup requesting that I do a video on strategies of how to stop self-abandoning. So thank you @cupofnoodlesoup for the great idea. And here we go. In this video, I'm going to give you one humdinger strategy that is guaranteed to keep you aligned with your authentic self, your true self, and to keep you from self-abandoning. Now, remember, I use this in my life to maintain balance and to be able to create discernment around the decisions that I'm making from the biggest to the smallest. And I'm never led astray. It's perfectly aligned with my intuition. And when I stray from this, I wind up feeling doubtful about myself and misbehaving in one way or another. And that leads to feeling shame. And before I explain this strategy, I want to let you know that breaking the habit of self-abandonment is not like a genie wish. It doesn't work like that. It's a practice and it takes effort and it takes intention, but the reward is really more freedom, more internal freedom than you can possibly imagine. So let's dive in to this one idea I'm going to give you today about how to stop self-abandoning. And that is something that I learned in the Al-Anon program that has to do with primary purpose. It's aligning with your primary purpose so that you stop self-betraying. I adapted it to self-betrayal. Now, when I say primary purpose, I don't mean like your primary purpose in life, like why am I here? This idea came to the AA program. People that are in AA and Alcoholics Anonymous, their primary purpose is to stop drinking, to be abstinent, because every time they take a drink, then everything goes to hell in a handbasket. So their primary purpose from the get-go always has to be, don't take that first drink. Now in Al-Anon, for the friends and family of Al-Anon, it's a little more complicated, right? Because we're dealing with all of our behaviors and our emotions and who we are. We don't just have one thing we need to stop, right? So when we adapt this primary purpose, we adapt it to every single situation that we're going to go into. What is my primary purpose in this moment? So I want to give you a bunch of examples to break this down. Okay, I'll give you the first one. When my dad was dying, I went home and my primary purpose, he didn't die for a while later, but my primary purpose when I first got his diagnosis was to make sure that we were okay. I had sent him some, nasty letters back when I was a kid, and I wanted to make sure that my side of the street was clean. I wanted to make sure that we were okay. We had had a strained relationship up and down throughout our time together. So I asked him that, are we okay? And his response was, oh yeah, we're great. You're a wonderful mother. And then he said, the problem with you is, and he went into a whole list of how I'm controlling and examples of how, my offer to drive to the hospital the next morning was me trying to control the situation. All of these things that probably were true of a past me, right? But my primary purpose was to get an answer to a question. And he had answered that question, which was, yeah, we're fine. And the other primary purpose I had that I wanted was to get an answer to the question, could we have a deeper conversation? And it became really clear to me right away that deeper conversation was not going to be available to me. That for whatever reason, he wasn't in the place or the stage, or maybe never had the capacity to have a conversation at that level. And so I wasn't going to have that. That was my primary purpose, and I stuck with it. If I had allowed myself to get derailed from my primary purpose, I would have gotten defensive about him calling me controlling or whatever, my ego would have interpreted that as. I would have gone down a whole rabbit hole. Maybe I would have tried to justify or defend myself or not be honest about the times that I am controlling and all of those things. And it would have wound up completely differently. So that's one example. Here's another one. I worked with a team once, and I was training them, and the leader of the team, the owner of the company, was sort of like a mother hen to everybody, and everybody came to her and dumped their problems on her. Well, she started looking at her primary purpose in every meeting that she had with an employee. And for example, one was she had to coach this particular employee about how to handle a situation. She had to lift her up and coach her on this. So She could not then, when the employee started to talk about how difficult her life is or whatever, she could not go into a whole nother diatribe of like, oh my gosh, you poor thing, let me help, let me step in, let me overfunction so you don't have to feel these ways. She couldn't do that because her primary purpose was to help this young woman deal with a situation that she had to deal with to raise her up as an employee in her company. Okay, another example. I had a client text me once. She had decided her primary purpose was she really, really wanted to spend the weekend with her family. She wanted to be present with her family. And she texted me. She was watching a football game and she said, I'm sitting here watching football with my husband and all I want to do is get up and work. I just want to go back to my computer and work and I'm stressing out about all of these things. And I said, well, you told me when we started seeing each other that your primary purpose was to be more present in your marriage and to be more available to your husband and to deepen that relationship. And you had decided and you feel that watching football together and having these friends over is very iterative to that process. If that's your primary focus, if that's your primary purpose, then you're going to have to settle yourself down to stick with that. Because to do anything else would be to divert from your primary purpose, right? So you might have a primary purpose to not have your attention swept in all of these different directions. Sometimes when I sit down to dinner, it's like, okay, my primary purpose is just to be really here in this game that I'm playing with my son and my husband. That means my phone has to go off. It's got to go on the other side of the room. All kinds of things have to happen so that I can be aligned with my primary purpose. When you are really clear on what your primary purpose is and you stick to that, you can't abandon yourself. It's impossible because if you stick to what your intention is and who you're wanting to be and how you're wanting to show up in that moment, then you are by definition not self-abandoning. Now remember, you have to do it for it to work. It's not like going to the gym and walking around and looking at the weights and expecting to be buff when you get back. If you're enjoying this, if this is speaking to you, there's a very low cost class on my website called From Hot Mess to Harmony, and I'll put the link in that below. Okay, now here's a caveat. When you're deciding what your primary purpose is so that you don't self-abandon, it can't be something like, well, my primary purpose is that I don't come off like I'm an idiot. My primary purpose is that I don't look stupid. That's not a primary purpose. In fact, the idea of saying it that way is in itself a self-abandonment, right? You're like insulting yourself before you even get out of the gate. This is not about how other people think. Remember, self-abandonment and self-betrayal is all about what we think of ourselves. Whenever we get caught up in what other people think about us, we are by definition abandoning ourselves because the only thing that matters is what we think about ourselves. And that doesn't mean that we get to go and do whatever the heck we want because we're not going to feel good about ourselves if we do that. Right? But you have to discern between what you're browbeating yourself with and what is truly like, no, I'm good with this. It's a really simple thing that you can do that if you remember, it's going to tell you your true north at every step of the way. Oftentimes, my primary purpose is to show up humble, show up as myself, to be the most authentic me I can be. And that actually, I think I did one on authenticity at one point, a video on authenticity where I share about how it's not that easy to do because our ego is bombarded all the time by what do people think and how do people feel and what do I need to be and all this kind of stuff. And so sometimes my primary purpose is like, hey, you know what? I just want to check my ego at the door, all the things it's worried about, all the, fears it has and all the thoughts about whatever. I got to be funny. I got to be this. I got to do all the things. I just want to be the best version of me, right? And that's always, I think, the best primary purpose, to be quite honest, for myself. It just keeps me grounded. I hope this was helpful. Thank you at Cup of Noodle Soup. Any other suggestions people have, I'd love to hear them. And please subscribe, share, pass along, follow my podcast, The Intuition Incubator. That's the greatest levels of support you can possibly give me. So I appreciate your time and have a wonderful day.